Hey there, and welcome to WP Roundtable, and we have another great interview today that I am not going to hold off on much longer, so Kellen, go ahead.
Sorry. Started out with a bang. Muted myself. All right. Happy to be on tonight with the one and only Pippin Williamson and my usual cohorts here. I'm Kellen Mace, independent freelance web developer from the east side of Michigan. Happy to be on tonight.
Hey guys. I'm Kyle Maurer, developer and co-founder of Real Big Marketing based in Jackson, Michigan. Really excited to have Pippin Williamson with us today. If you don't know who Pippin is, then I'd be surprised because I've known who Pippin was for a really long time. He's a leader in the WordPress community and incredibly prolific plugin developer, mastermind and creator behind Easy Digital Downloads, the super cool affiliate WP plugin released just this year, Restrict Content Pro, another awesome plugin, and many other really cool plugins. A very prolific blogger over on PippinsPlugins.com, writing some of the most useful and helpful blog posts that I've found for the kind of stuff that I like to do, which is plugin development. He's a co-host for Apply Filters, the only developer-focused WordPress podcast that I'm aware of, and something I'm a big fan of. Pippin is a member of the plugin review team for WordPress.org, so if you submit a plugin to .org to get reviewed, Pippin's one of the guys who might take a look at it. He's a core contributor. I noticed Pippin's name in the credits for at least one release. You might correct me on it, probably more than one. And a WordCamp speaker and community organizer for sure. So that's it. Pippin, say hello.
Hey everybody, how are we all doing?
I'm good.
Doing great.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so I hope I didn't miss anything. You've got a good list of items to your credit when it comes to the WordPress world. I'd have to say that probably the one thing that, in my mind, you're known for as the guy who makes me feel incredibly unproductive, like I'm getting nothing done, because I don't know how you do it all. So anyway,
work
that's
hard,
what we're getting into,
get enough sleep.
I'd like to step back. We always, kind of start with the beginning. Talk about how you got into the web, what you were doing before that, what was your occupation, where did you want to go, and then the turn of events that brought you into WordPress.
I started getting into the web late high school, early college days, which would have been around 2006, 2007, and I kind of dabbled in web development for a little while, just kind of doing some small freelance development projects on the side. I was originally going to school for linguistics and Latin American studies, and I wanted to go down to Guatemala and other countries down in Central America to do language restoration. Eventually decided I liked programming better, so I started getting more heavily involved with web development, ended up getting into WordPress through the help of my brother, who was running a blog at the time on WordPress, and he needed extra help doing some modifications to his template files. And once I kind of got into it, when I first started, I actually really didn't like WordPress very much. I thought it was kind of terrible. And then I just kept playing with it a little bit more, realized that it was really cool, it could do everything that I wanted to do, and started doing more client work focusing around just like general WordPress websites for clients, business sites primarily. And then that eventually led into plugin development. And once I got in plugin development, I didn't stop. I just wanted to keep building plugins, and then eventually moved out of client work and into product development, which is where I am now.
Excellent. So it almost kind of sounded like you got into WordPress to begin with rather than coding or anything else first. Or were you actually coding and designing prior to the WordPress thing?
I was doing a little bit of coding, but just HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript here and there. I learned PHP initially from WordPress.
And you already said you didn't. What was it you said you didn't really like about WordPress at first?
I think I didn't like it because at the time I was scared of PHP. I was scared of programming, and I looked at it and I was like, why are these template files so complex? Why can't I just put my HTML here and write my CSS and be done? And so it was mostly out of naivety, but that's why. Once I kind of got over that and realized what all was going on and happening under the hood, then it made a lot more sense and I started to enjoy it.
I'll dive in next here for a quick second. How about in the beginning when you were first? I think you said you started doing freelance first.
Yep.
What types of clients?
I did some of everything. I did a lot of like small music sites for friends and family, musicians. I did a couple of sites for some software companies. Again, friends and family included was kind of where everything started. And then my first major client that kept me busy for about 2 years was actually a company that produced a vacuum therapy device for erectile dysfunction.
Really?
Yep, and they kept me busy for quite a while. Turns out it's a very lucrative business.
But their banner ads are actually legit.
Yep.
Enhancement. Oh, that's pretty funny. I have another question for you. I've heard, on some other interviews you've done and things, I've heard you say, originally I don't want to say scared, but whatever, a little like turned off by plugin development and thought, well, that's not really my forte. I understand themes and template files and building those, and plugins are this other, realm of WordPress that I
definitely they're scary.
Don't quite get into yet. But what was it some of your client projects, some of the clients who were requesting certain features that got you first into building them?
So I had a client that wanted the ability to upload fonts to their site and then choose the elements that they were applied to. So if they had a header on this page or a header on this page, they wanted to apply custom fonts to them, which is like a designer's worst nightmare. But they wanted to do that, and so I built this functionality for them, and I built it directly into their theme. And then after I did that, I thought, hey, this is kind of cool. Why don't I see if I can write a tutorial on this for anybody else who wants to? So I wrote a tutorial and published it on a site called Pro Blog Design, run by a guy named Michael Martin, which at the time was a really, really active blog. And ended up getting people commenting on the tutorial just saying, hey, this is cool. Would you make a plugin out of this? And my initial response was like, I have no idea. I've never written a plugin. That's really scary. I know it's going to work totally different than anything I've ever done. But I kind of decided that was a stupid response, and I should try and at least look into it and see what plugin development was like. So I dove in and realized that it was almost exactly the same, and I had my entire plugin done, basically just moving it out of the theme and into a plugin in like 20 minutes. And that's where it started. And I realized, oh, plugin development's really not that hard. It's not scary. It's not intimidating. And if you can write a theme, you can write a plugin.
That's awesome. So you're totally making a living off WordPress right now, and at what point in time and how did you come to the conclusion that could be your livelihood rather than something you were doing on the side?
Sophomore year of college was when I decided that. I was doing during my sophomore year, I was working at a department on campus for East Asian Studies, just doing their general web development, and I was also working as a stagehand at a theater. And I was doing freelance WordPress development on the side, basically late at night from 11 to 2 a.m., just doing side projects. And I was just doing more and more. I was engaged at the time, so I was kind of thinking ahead and trying to figure out what am I going to do to support myself and my wife in a year and a half or 2 years as soon as I'm done with college. And so I decided during my junior year that I was going to give it a try and see if I could make it, see if I could pay the bills and get everything covered with just development work. And it was kind of, if I can do it, then we're going to go full steam ahead. If we can't, then we'll step back and reassess. And it ended up working out pretty well.
That's great. So you're a pretty well-respected plugin developer at this point, and a lot of us in the community, when we see Pippin Williamson's name attached to it, we just know, okay, it's good. I don't need to worry about this. But maybe let's just for fun go back in time and talk about if you can think of any examples, because I like to talk about them sometimes. back when you were first making like your first plugins or your first websites, even, what are some of those great mistakes that you look back on that you just kind of chuckle about today?
Sure. Well, one, as just like from a development perspective, I can remember a couple of early plugins that had really horrific vulnerabilities in them, like the kind of vulnerability that somebody who knows how could delete your entire database with a single request to your server, like no problem. And I can look back and think there's definitely a couple of plugins that had those. One of my primary plugins early on, which is kind of the first one that got me really into commercial plugin development, was an image slider, and it had like the most horrendous database schema imaginable. Basically, I had no idea how to structure anything in the database or how to store anything in a way that made sense, and so I just had stuff shoved over here and stuff shoved over there. And at the time, it wasn't really an issue, but then I discovered that people with image sliders have times when they might want to have 50 images in a slideshow or 100 images in a slideshow, and it turns out that if you did that, it would actually crash your server. And like there was no way to use it. So there's different things like that. There's another one. I accidentally created a bug that would allow someone to log into your site as an admin without having any credentials whatsoever. That was pretty cool. There's some good ones like that. We look back on some of the, I don't know, just logic errors or just not knowing that we should look at these kind of vulnerabilities and protect against them, and we learn from them. There was one plugin I wrote. It's actually still alive. Thankfully it's been fixed now. But I got an email from another developer that I'd known pretty well, and he says, "Hey, I know you've done quite a bit of stuff, and overall your stuff's pretty good, but this plugin's terrible. This thing is so insecure." And sure enough, it hadn't been updated in about a year and a half or 2 years. I went back and looked at it and just kind of cringed, and was really glad that somebody who was nice and respectful and was the person that found it and reported it to me, as opposed to somebody who was going to exploit it for their own good. But those kind of mistakes happen.
How about loading jQuery from Google?
I did that a few times.
I know that's one of your favorites.
Oh yeah. I did that. I actually discovered it recently in one of my older plugins after I wrote a couple of blog posts condemning people for doing it. That was kind of a, I think I'm going to take this out quietly.
Yeah, right.
So Kyle listed like a whole list of things that you do on the intro here. What are your responsibilities at Pippin Plugins and in the various worlds that you are a part of?
Sure. So PippinsPlugins is kind of the overall plugin business that comprises 3 primary products and 3 different websites. So it's PippinsPlugins.com, but then that is also the umbrella for Easy Digital Downloads, as well as Affiliate WP and Restrict Content Pro, which I would consider my 3 primary projects. PippinsPlugins is also just kind of my own personal blog where I write tutorials or occasionally write personal blog posts. Overall, I'm developer, the lead on each of the 3 projects, the support manager, and accounting, unfortunately. So mostly I started out originally doing everything. So I did support, I did management, I did development, and now it's actually broadened out, and I work with about 5 or 6 other people that each do various things. I have a couple people that work with me on doing support, a couple that work on development, some full-time, some part-time, and then 2 different people that do some more of the business side of things in accounting primarily.
Awesome. Yeah, you're running some really, really cool businesses and an inspiration to a lot of us out there who are really interested in exploring this awesome space that is premium WordPress products. So maybe you could tell us a little bit just about following up on your responsibilities. What are your favorite responsibilities, the parts of your job that you just love the most or most fulfilling, and then what are the parts of your job that you just wish would die in a fire?
Support and support. Support is the most gratifying aspect of any aspect of anything I do, of everything that I do. It is where people get to tell you that you have changed their life with a product that you built, or you were in some ways partially responsible for creating something that allowed them to change their lifestyle or to build their new business. You get to hear things from people say, "I love you for building this." And then at the flip side, you also get to hear people tell you that you're the worst person that's ever walked on the face of the earth and that you should die in a fire. And all like these terrible, terrible things. But it's also it's a burden and it's a gift. We get it through support, through customer support, we get to find out what are the difficulties that people are having with our products, and we get to hopefully address those, and we get to take that feedback and make things better and better. We get to learn how people are actually using it, and that's all really, really cool. So it's the best part and the worst part. Outside of that, I'd also say just having the freedom to sit down, whether it's late at night, early in the morning, in the middle of the day, and just work through solving a problem through code is really enjoyable. Also, I would add on to that with maybe finding other people to work with, whether it's in customer support or development. When you find those people that you like working with as well, that's also extremely rewarding.
So what are some of your big-time favorite projects that you've worked on? Maybe not necessarily, or maybe not specifically the ones that you're dealing with now, but maybe some of the ones that have excited you the most.
I mean, it kind of varies. So a lot of times, my favorite project is whatever I am working on right now, because maybe because I just decided to work on it. I'm really having a lot of fun with Affiliate WP right now, because it's been a project it's recent enough in when it was developed and when I started building it that I was able to take everything that I learned from building Easy Digital Downloads and building Research Content Pro and apply it to that, as well as all the other plugins. So to me, it feels like it has a much better foundation, which is a lot of fun. I think some of my other favorite projects are also like little tiny plugins that no one ever uses are some of the best. One of my personal favorites is it's called Transient Manager. It's one that I built that allows you to go in and delete or edit transients that are stored in your database. That was a whole lot of fun. I really like little projects. One of my favorite things about plugins is that they can be as large or as little as you want. I have a plugin that's one line of code, and it's one of my favorite plugins because of that fact alone, and I think that's really cool. I don't know. I'd say my favorite projects definitely change over time. It's more of like, what's my favorite project this week or this month or this year? If I had to say overall, I think just overall would be just building plugins in the WordPress ecosystem as an overall project. Okay, I've got to ask, is this one-line plugin in the repository? Yes, it is. And what is it? It's called CodePen OEmbed. I actually co-wrote it with Andrew Norcross, which is kind of funny considering it's one line of code. Turns out that we are actually Chris Coyer from CSS Tricks posted a tweet one day saying that he really wanted to get OEmbed support for CodePen added to WordPress because CodePen had just released their OEmbed API, and so Norcross and I both responded at the same time like, hey, sure, we can make it happen. So we both wrote a plugin at the same time, and we did it in slightly different means, and then we decided, wait, this is silly. Why do we have two of them? Let's just put both of our names on it and release it as is, and it's one line with two names.
That's way cool. I love that. I want to talk about your specific plugins and those projects, but I'm always interested in where you get your inspiration for these plugins. Like, where do these ideas come from? And also, like, there's a ton of ideas for plugins out there. I've got a whole database practically of ideas for plugins. But what are like the examples of like the ones that you would get really excited about, or the characteristics of a plugin idea that you would just go, oh my gosh, I gotta stop what I'm doing and make that?
The plugins that get me the most excited are the ones that I'm going to use in my daily work life. Things that I need, things that make my job easier or do something for me. So, for example, one day I was working on Easy Digital Downloads. I was trying to build something. I don't know what it was. I was building some feature or other, and I was having a heck of a time with transients. And so I said, this is annoying. Okay, you know what? Stop. let's write a plugin to manage transients. And so that was awesome because I could build a plugin that fixed a problem for me, and then it fixed problems for other people. Another day I was on my site and I went into my spam folder and I noticed, oh, I have 40,000 spam comments in here. I should get rid of those. Hit empty spam, and sure enough, a few moments later, my server crashes. Takes 10 minutes to come back online. And so I said, this is dumb. Let's write a plugin. Let's fix this. So I wrote a plugin called Batch Spam Comment Deletion, which then fixes that problem. So I really like plugins that fix problems, and I really like scratching my own itch. So if I have something that I want to accomplish or that I want to fix, then I like to write a plugin to do it. Or if I can't find one that does it already. And I think that's I've heard people say that they don't always agree with that in terms of for like business reasons. But I really like the idea of trying to always scratch your own itch with projects and products. So, for example, when I first released PippinsPlugins.com, I knew that I wanted to have a premium content section that was only available to paid subscribers, which was basically more in-depth tutorials and code examples and things like that. But I didn't have a plugin to actually handle that. At the time, I wasn't able to find any membership plugin that I liked the way that it worked, and so I decided to write my own. So I scratched my own itch and I wrote a membership plugin, which turned into a pretty good product. It's still alive. And then that turned into, I was selling that on CodeCanyon, and then I wanted to sell it through my own site. But I didn't really like any of the e-commerce systems specifically for selling digital products. I felt like everything was too suited for physical products. But all I wanted to do was sell a plugin. All I wanted to do was take people's money and give them a zip file. And I didn't feel like any of the e-commerce plugins did that super well, or there was just too much extra in them. So I wrote an e-commerce plugin to do it. So I scratched my own itch and decided, hey, let's solve this problem for myself. And then as I was building out EDD and like my own personal stores, I wanted to have an affiliate program, and I wanted to offer my user base an affiliate program, but I didn't really like any of the options that were available. So I decided, all right, let's build our own. Let's build one that integrates with EDD and integrates with Restricted Content Pro, and so I built Affiliate WP. And again, scratched our own itch and built a product. And so those are definitely my favorite kinds. It's generally, honestly, it's where most ideas come from for plugins now. Early on, I was building some just because somebody said, hey, you should write a plugin for this. Or I need this, or I need this. And I wrote a lot of those. There's a lot of plugins in the repository and on CodeCanyon that were built just for those reasons. But I found that I don't really like those plugins as much because I don't have a personal interest in maintaining them. So I don't constantly push out bug fixes or improvements to them, or they get behind. But if I'm actively using it, then I'm going to make sure it still works.
All right, cool. Thanks, Pippin. Interesting info. I have the next question for you related to the products that you've put out, particularly EDD, which I think was your first large-scale.
Second. First was Restricted Content Pro.
Oh, okay, Restricted Content Pro. Okay, all right. Well, in that case, we had a question for you about how in the WordPress plugin space can you go about testing the waters, so to speak. If you are trying to scratch your own itch and you think you have an idea that could catch on, could be valuable to others, and you want to make a commercial product where people will actually give up money to buy what you're selling. Before you launch into something the magnitude of some of the plugins that you have, how would you go about doing that?
Sure.
Testing interest.
It definitely varies a lot. So specifically for EDD, kind of did. We did a little bit of testing. Mostly I just kind of talked to my Twitter followers and other people that I knew in the WordPress world saying, hey, does this serve a purpose for you? This is something that I personally want and need. Would this help you solve a problem? And so just reaching out to people directly was pretty successful for that. Another example, like with Affiliate WP, we did quite a bit of that actually, but we did it in two ways. So for Affiliate WP, we built it because we didn't really like the affiliate marketing plugins that were currently available, and we wanted one that was directly tied into EDD as well as to other e-commerce platforms. And so we checked out, like, would users use this? Would they pay for it in two ways? One, we just asked. So again, we went to Twitter, went to Facebook, and went to our email list and said, is this something that you're interested in? And got some feedback that way. Another was we just paid attention to support forms. If we could consistently see people having problems with existing systems or having a hard time finding one that they liked, then that tells me there's a problem. That tells me that there's a problem that we can try to solve. And so we had a couple of plugins at the time that we integrated with, but we constantly had posts in our support forums saying, hey, I'm having trouble with this, it's not working, or I don't like this, or I need this feature. And that right there was perfect feedback that says, yes, this is a viable market. I think that overall, though, if you don't have a user base that you can pay attention to in terms of what their needs are, is just asking. Ask users, ask your Twitter followers, ask anyone that you can, even if it's 5 people. Just say, hey, does this have a use case for you? It's gonna differ for all the different plugins. I mean, because there's some plugins that are so niche that it's much harder to get really good answers on that, and then there's others that are widely used that you can get a whole bunch of valuable feedback on.
Yeah.
Another is look at if you can find like other plugins that are similar. Look at what their user bases are. Look at their customer bases and look what people are saying at them. If you find a plugin that does pretty similar to what you want to build, but it has no users, then that might be an indication that there's not that much of a market for it. Or it might just be that they're not making it visible. So it's not necessarily a perfect way, but it can help.
Hey, Pippin, we've got some questions coming in from our viewers. Nick V at TechVolts wants to know a couple things here. First wants to know, basically, what's the most important thing you do when you start a plugin? Like, top thing in terms of development or planning, anything like that. When you start a plugin, what are the most important things? And also, your favorite WordCamp.
So one of the most important things, it differs for every single plugin. But let's say that you have a large plugin that's going to be storing a lot of data in the database. Think about how that data is going to be stored. So don't just assume you can drop everything into the post meta table. Don't just assume you can drop everything into the options table. It might work great when you have 1 or 2 pieces of data stored in there, but suddenly if you have 10,000 or 50,000, it might not work as well. So if you have a plugin that stores things in the database, think about what you're storing and how you need to store it and how you need to access that. Do you need to query it? It's a pretty important little detail. I made a pretty fundamental flaw when I was first writing EDD that I didn't store the transaction total, like the total amount for each individual purchase, as its separate value. I stored it in a serialized array with a bunch of other data, which meant that there was no way for me to quickly query all the payments and do calculations to say, okay, how much money have you made this month? It was really difficult to do, and that was a fundamental flaw that I made early on. Thankfully, we caught it early enough that we could fix it. But if you can prevent some of those things from happening, you'll be much better off in the future. Favorite WordCamp? It's a toss-up between Miami and WordCamp Grand Rapids. Both of them are absolutely stellar. Honestly, every WordCamp I've been to is awesome. Those two are above and beyond.
That's so awesome. I've heard so many good things about Miami, and I hope you're not just throwing out Grand Rapids because you got a couple Michigan guys here.
Nope.
That's right, yeah.
I told a couple people the only reason I wasn't at Grand Rapids this year is because I was obligated to go to another one because one of my friends was organizing his inaugural WordCamp. Otherwise, I would have been at Grand Rapids.
All right. Well, we'll probably see you next year then.
I'll be there, hopefully.
So I want to ask you about feature requests.
Sure.
I'm really curious about that. I know you've got some high-profile plugins out there, some things that I know people are using for quite a variety of reasons. So naturally, you're going to get feature requests. So I'd love to hear like examples from you, really great feature requests that you got from your audience, from your users, that you were just like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm putting that in, and things that you did. And also examples of maybe feature requests that that really like made you LOL because they were right on.
Let's see if I can think of a couple. Unfortunately, I don't keep honestly, I should keep like a CSV or something, a database that just has the best feature request or the most ridiculous ones, because there's some that are just amazing that you get. I think one of definitely one of the better ones for EDD specifically. We have an extension for tracking commissions, and people wanted to be able to automatically pay commissions at the time that a purchase was generated. So you make a $50 sale, and then you pay out commissions to 5 different people at the same time. That was a pretty cool feature request that turned it into a really valuable feature, just in terms of what it did as well as like what it was to the product. Let's see some other. There's a feature that was requested that I actually got really excited to build, but I never built it. We decided it didn't really fit in, which was webhooks for EDD. If you've ever used Stripe or a lot of other online payment processors, they'll have webhooks, which are basically actions that fire to specific URLs when something happens. So a payment's marked as completed, a payment's marked as refunded, a discount's created, a discount's updated, a customer's created, different actions like that, and then you can send API requests basically out to remote servers and do something with that data. And so I started building this big feature and got it mostly complete, and then we just decided it didn't need to go in, and so we stopped building it, which kind of made me sad because it was really fun to work on. Trying to think of a ridiculous one. We've definitely got quite a few. We get ones that sometimes are crazy security-wise. We'll get people that will ask about like different ways to protect their products that are getting purchased or sold, or like ways to prevent certain people from purchasing. And like as a general feature, they're great, but for whatever reason, the way that the user requests them, like they don't realize that it would actually make it impossible for anyone to purchase, and different things like that. At first, I can't really think of. There's a couple of really specific examples that I actually ran across recently that I wish I could remember. Come back to me at the end, and if I've thought of it, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I know you've got a lot of them. Your plugin directory on your site, there's always a comment thread after each plugin, and I'm always reading it, and I see so many people going, "Hey, love your plugin. Have you thought about this?" And you always respond with, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea," or "Not happening."
We actually got one the other day that was kind of cool. Now I'm digging up our feature request form. We got a request for Apple Pay, which didn't surprise me. We actually got the request for Apple Pay 2 hours after the Apple press conference, which was pretty quick. But the funny thing about it was that the way that they requested it was so anybody could use it. Well, the inherent flaw in the feature request is that Apple Pay only works on mobile devices and only works for like mobile apps. You can't just integrate Apple Pay with a website. You have to integrate it with an actual app. So you have to, like, for example, you couldn't use Apple Pay on Amazon.com, but you could use Apple Pay through the Amazon mobile app, and so there was no way possible for us to use it to do it. Let's see. There's a whole lot of examples if I can find them. Feature requests are fun because it's where you get to see some. For one, you get to see the ways that people want to use your product or your plugin, whether they're crazy and ridiculous or spot on. A lot of the extensions for Easy Digital Downloads came about because of feature request. We had somebody request Aweber integration, so we built an Aweber integration, and that's now one of our more popular extensions. We've had a lot of people ask for the ability to send automatic emails after a product is updated. So like if you're selling a WordPress plugin and you push out a new version, send an email to all of the customers. Those kinds of things are things that we've gotten a lot of. And some of them have led to extensions, some very good extensions, some not as good, and some of them are still sitting there. So anybody who wants to build a feature, go check out a feature request form. There's a whole bunch in there.
Cool, man. Next, we wanted to launch into the WordPress plugin review team. To start us off, how did you first get involved in the team, and how long have you been doing that?
So I got involved because one day I just got an email from Otto, who was one of the leaders of the plugin review team and the plugin repository overall, and he just said, "Hey, you want to join? You want to help us review plugins? Sure, sounds fun." And I was reviewing that night. That happened about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I think. I want to say it was maybe August of last year or somewhere in summer last year. And that's been a lot of fun. We get to see a lot of plugins come through the repository, some great, some terrible. It's a constant reminder of where we all started. It's kind of fun.
Has being on the plugin review team kind of influenced how you conceptualize or you design your own plugins?
Yeah, it absolutely has. Every now and then. So anytime we review a plugin, we download every single plugin and we open it and we go line by line through every single file. There's not a single plugin in the repository that doesn't get reviewed line by line. So we get to see a lot of different development practices. Like I said, we get to see some that are just flat out terrible, and we get to see some that are really awesome. So every now and then a really good one comes through, and I'm like, that's cool. I really like the way that you did that. And it sticks. And then either it gets applied to another plugin or to an update, or it's just something that kind of sticks in the back of your mind as something you might use later on. It definitely does, because you get to see all calibers of code, and when you see something that's really cool, it tends to stick with you.
I'm sure that's got to be really, really cool to get kind of like that first glimpse and to just kind of always get to go over other people's code and other people's submissions.
It's really fun anytime a great new plugin comes through, because you're like, yes, I cannot wait for this to come out in 2 days.
Awesome. Hey, we've got another question. This is an interesting one. In case anybody watching doesn't realize, there are actually plugins on WordPress.org, the plugin repository, that Pippin didn't write. There's a few of them that were not made by Pippin. And so out of those few non-Pippin Williamson plugins, this question is from Nick V at TechBolts on Twitter. Out of those few plugins you didn't write, what's your favorite?
Sure. I've got a couple of them, actually. One of my, give me 2 seconds, I'm actually going to pull up, I actually keep my favorites list on WordPress.org and actually use it specifically for that purpose, because there's so many of them. So there's a couple that I really, really like. Number one, I really love Subtitles. Subtitles by Philip Arthur Moore is fantastic. It's a really simple plugin that you have your post title, and it lets you put in a subtitle, and then it just works with any theme. It's so simple, but it's awesome and beautiful. Another one that's definitely probably in my top 5 is User Switching by, I think it's John Blackburn.
I love that plugin.
Oh, it's so fantastic. Anybody who doesn't know what it is, user switching allows you to go to your users page in your WordPress admin and switch to any other user. So basically, you get to log in as that user and see anything and everything exactly as they do. So if you're ever building in a site that has like account pages or any kind of user privileges or access, it is the best debugging tool imaginable. And you get to log into them without ever knowing their password or anything like that. You just click a link, you switch to them, and then when you're done, you click one more link and you switch back. And it's just beautiful. And Duplicate Post would be another one. Allows you to just quickly copy one post to a new draft, and it just works exceptionally well. These are all plugins that integrate perfectly with the standard WordPress UI, which is always a huge plus for me. To me, I think a mark of a great plugin, a lot of times, at least from the UI perspective, is when you can have it installed for a month, 6 months, 2 years, and you just forget that it's not part of core because it's so seamless.
That's a really good way to describe it. I really like that. And I have the same philosophy that everything that we build, all the plugins that we make, that's so fundamental to our approach.
Honestly, you shouldn't be able to tell that a plugin's a plugin. It should just match perfectly in its behavior, in its UI, in the way that it looks, in everything.
Yeah, I'm always very turned off by a plugin when I activate it and it has some very, very custom UI. Yep. It just looks like it's so obviously not native. To
me, it shows in one way it shows a lack of a lack of attention to detail. To me, it also shows a lack of caring. I think if you really care about a plugin, then you're going to take the time to do it really well. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit of an overly harsh statement to say it's a lack of caring, because I know there's a lot of people that really care about their plugins that don't integrate with the WordPress UI. But I think in general it applies.
Yeah, I agree. So I've got a couple questions about EDD.
Sure.
Your flagship plugin, super, super cool. I started using it a couple years ago. I've always thought it was fantastic. And I want to know about kind of like what you've learned about your user base as it's grown. It's a really big plugin, several 100,000 downloads out there, last I checked. And what kind of businesses are running EDD? What are they selling?
Sure.
What's the typical EDD user like? And have you encountered any like unusual use cases for it that like kind of surprised you?
So in terms of overall user base, it's some of everything. We've got some of the ones that you'd probably expect. Ebooks, music, software is all pretty standard. WordPress plugins and themes are both really standard. We have some that are a little less standard, which would be like event tickets is one that we get quite a few users for. Selling services is a pretty good one. People sell like website design services through it. People sell review services and things like that. The first one that caught me off guard was somebody said, I want to sell t-shirts and I want to ship products. And I was like, did you look at the name of the plugin? Like, you realize it's called digital downloads, right? And they're like, yeah, that's cool. I just like yours, so I'd like to ship products through it. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's a compliment. So we ended up writing an extension that did some simple shipping features, which I still think is funny and kind of silly, but it works. And it turns out it's actually one of our top-selling extensions is simple shipping, which is kind of funny. So that definitely caught me off guard. We get people sometimes. Crowdfunding was a really big one that caught me off guard initially. Was the number of people wanting to build crowdfunding sites on top of EDD. And that ended up getting really pushed forward because a team of a couple guys built an add-on for EDD specifically for crowdfunding, and that turned out to be huge. And that was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened, and one of the best things. One of the best things was hearing someone say, "Hey, we raised $50,000 to pay for someone's cancer treatment," or we raised $30,000 to pay for school supplies. Those kinds of things are really cool to hear. And then hearing someone say, I raised $150,000 for something and now I can't collect any of the money is like ruin your weekend type of, oh my God, I think I'm going to try and fix and help you because that's a problem. And I don't want to get sued. So it was awesome and terrible at the same time. I mean, for the user base, we have some of everything for sure. Little stores, big stores. I mean, we have everything from people that sell a few dollars a month to people that do $50,000, $200,000, $200,000 a month. Every range you can think of.
So, I'd like to find out a little bit more about affiliate WP.
Okay. What about it? What would you like to know?
The story behind it.
Sure.
How did you come to this?
So, affiliate WP came from wanting to scratch my own itch again because, so EDD had been running for about 2 years. Restrict Content Pro was about 3 years old at the time, and constantly had users saying, I want to set up an affiliate program. What plugin or service should I use? And we had some that we recommended just as the general, this is what's available, this is what you can choose from. But I was never happy with any of the options that we had to give to users. And the last thing that I like to do for users, especially if they were a good user or a good customer, was to send them to a service that I personally disliked or that I felt was a poor product or service. And unfortunately, that's what I kind of thought a lot of them were. Not all of them. So basically, I just decided, look, I sell a membership plugin, and we have a e-commerce plugin. An affiliate plugin just fits perfectly. It integrates perfectly with both of those, so why not go ahead and get the trifecta and do all three? Because Each one complements the other. One customer base merges into the other customer base. And so I decided to do it. I started it in, I think, February of this year. And spent about 3 months just kind of fumbling around, writing a line of code here, a line of code there, and didn't really get anywhere. I wasn't super enthused with the project. It was kind of one of those I knew that I felt like I needed to do, but I didn't want to do it yet. And then one day I had a customer she was a really good customer too. She'd spent a lot of money with us, and then she was using an affiliate plugin that we had recommended, and she came back and said, "This is terrible." And she also came back and reported a really serious flaw. And she said, it doesn't work at all. And I started digging into it, and I realized, oh, we're using this same affiliate system, and it doesn't work on our site either. This is a problem. So we need to fix our affiliate system too, because it doesn't work at all. And so I decided right then, I was like, all right, we're going to build this. We're going to get it done. And so 2 days later, we had a prototype working and running, and was tracking referrals. And then I think it took about 3 or 4 more weeks to actually get it built out to close to the MVP stage, and then we launched it. So it was really just kind of a scratch our own niche. We needed to build it for ourselves, and felt like we needed to build it for the customer base.
That's really awesome. So you got pushed over the edge by discovering a flaw in the system that you were using. Wow.
Well, so just like imagine you were selling a product or something, and you've been selling it for months or years, and you think everything's going fine, and suddenly you realize there are thousands and thousands of dollars missing somewhere. They're just gone. That was what we discovered. And it's like, okay, this is a problem that cannot continue. Let's fix this today. And so that's kind of what it was.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I definitely get it. That's awesome, and I think it's really, really awesome that you made it. I think it's just absolutely a fantastic product, and I actually think there was a need for this. A really serious one, because I don't really see anything out there quite like this that I would confidently use myself or recommend to people that I value.
The funny thing about affiliate marketing is affiliate marketing is probably one of the #1 industries that is known for sleazebags and scumballs. In terms of just it's kind of one of the darker parts of the web that unfortunately has a lot of bad people in it. It's kind of like pyramid schemes of the
or SEO.
Yeah, or SEO. But I kind of felt like it was not 100%, but I felt like there was a lot of that kind of mentality and behavior that carried over from some of the bad affiliate marketers to the affiliate marketing products, and I wanted to try and help change that. So we wanted to build something that was light and happy and that worked well, and that we're 100% honest with everything that it does or doesn't do. And that was one of the things. Because personally, I hate affiliate marketing. It's not something I ever want to do or deal with. I just realized that it's something that we have to be involved with because of the other things that we build.
It sounds to me like you're just rounding things out, right? We started today talking about the mail enhancement beginnings for Pippin, and now we've come full circle to the sleazebag internet marketers that you're enabling. No, I'm just kidding. One complimentary note. I really like just the layout and design of the affiliate WP site. I think is really slick. Did Andrew do that or somebody else?
Andrew Monroe gets 100% credit for that.
Cool. It looks slick. I like it.
He's a mastermind.
I really like it too, actually, and we used it as probably our principal source of inspiration for the last site that we recently built for a plugin we launched.
Oh, awesome! Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
We actually, it's all open source. If you want, anybody's welcome to fork the theme. We actually had there's another plugin that forked it recently and rebranded it and used it, and it worked really well for them too. So.
That is awesome. I didn't know that. I'm gonna look at it.
Yeah, it's on the Affiliate WP GitHub. It's all 100% open source.
Wow, nice. So I've got more questions.
Go for it.
You had a lot more experience by the time you launched Affiliate WP, because this was a pretty recent launch, relatively speaking.
April.
Yeah, April. Okay. And I thought it was awesome when I saw that you launched it. So you said 3 years prior you had launched Restrict Content Pro, so it's a pretty wide gap. And so I want to know, like, this time around, what did you do differently? You know, what lessons had you learned? And you said, you know, you knew what it was like to launch a premium product. You knew what it was like to sell a plugin.
Yep.
By this time, you were already a veteran in the space with a huge outreach. What did you say? This time, I'm doing it different.
There's a couple of things. So number one, from a development perspective, I was much more careful to actually lay out the foundation of the plugin, figure out where everything is going to get stored in the database, how it's organized, how things are going to work, things like that. Number two was I decided immediately I was not going to go at it alone. I actually reached out to Andrew to see if he wanted to partner with me on it before the plugin would even really started. I mean, the plugin was, I think, like 30 or 40 lines of code when I said, hey, Andrew, you want to join me? And that was really important both for the overall like development of the website, the design of the business, and also the support. Andrew does a ton of the support. And let's see. I think another one was realize, like, along with not going alone, was to say, figure out early if we need to expand, if we need to get another developer on board, if we need to get another support person on board or designer. And reaching out to existing customers, using our customer base from EDD, from Restrict Content Pro, etc. Those were all really, really valuable. It was definitely the most successful launch for a product that I've ever had, and I think all of those things together definitely contributed to it. Well,
I'm glad to hear that it was a really successful launch, and it looks like it's going to be another big one for you. I love it. Winding down here, touching on just a couple final topics before the clock ticks out. Apply filters, I love it. I love that podcast.
That's great.
I'm going to be reviewing it soon here for sure. I got to drop a review. And I might even hit you up on that offer that you say about reviewing a plugin.
Still stands.
Yeah. Tell us how, you're only really a couple episodes ahead of us, actually. We're on episode 23. I think you just did 25.
Yeah, so we're about a few ahead.
Yeah. How did you get started with Apply Filters, you and Brad Tenard? And did you set out to start a WP podcast just because you wanted to, and then just chose to focus on development, or did you actually like look around and say, there's nobody just focusing on development, we should start a podcast for it, or something like that?
It was more the latter. So I've been involved with podcasting for a while, either joining people for podcasts. I produced my own little podcast for a little while. I think Brad had done the same, and we both one of the things that we found with podcasts, just being developers, we really like to nerd out and talk with other developers about code and not worrying about other people thinking that we're crazy and talking gibberish. And so one day Brad just reached out to me and said, hey, you want to start a podcast with me? You want to talk about code? All right, fantastic, let's do it. Recorded episode 1, I think, the next week. Honestly, it was as simple as that. There wasn't a lot of planning to it. There wasn't anything like that. We just decided, sure, let's start a podcast. So we jumped on, recorded it, and published it. We've done a little bit more planning since then, but that's really where it started. We wanted to do something that was super informal, and we wanted to just focus on development. We wanted to be able to get into the nitty-gritty details of code and development and servers without worrying about annoying other people or making it so that someone else didn't get any value out of the show. So we want to be very upfront, said this is just about code, so if you're not a developer, well, it might not be for you. Because there really weren't any podcasts that were just doing that. There's a lot of podcasts that will go out and like have a developer like myself or someone else come on as a guest, but we're still don't necessarily want to talk about code the whole time because it's not just developers listening. And so that was the idea for Apply Filters, was just to give us that place where we're just talking about code the whole time.
Yeah, I definitely love that, actually. I think that's super cool, and I'm a big fan of WordPress podcasts. I listen to pretty much all of them that I can find, and Apply Filters kind of stands out as one that's totally unique, totally enjoyable. I'm sharing episodes with my developer and saying, oh, they talked about the extract function today, and episode 24 or 5 or whatever.
Yeah, I think that was 25.
I think it was 25. Yeah. Like, we shouldn't use the extract function now. And I just love this, talking about code. I'll share other podcasts with my business partner. Chris Lemons did something inspirational today in this podcast, but Apply Filters, like, man, I get into it. You actually talk about the code. Like, that's awesome. I love it.
It's glad to hear it. I mean, that's what it's for. That's what we wanted to do. So glad to hear that it's working.
Yeah, it definitely is. So we're really cruising down here. I know that you'll frequently be seen at WordCamps. You talk at a lot of WordCamps. You make it to a bunch of them. That's super awesome. Maybe you have any cool WordCamp experiences or WordCamp stories that you can share with us?
Sure. I think my first experience was going in and meeting people that I idolized in the community as developers or as people that ran sites or things like that. Was really, really cool. I remember meeting John James Jacoby for the first time, I think at WordCamp Miami, and like that was amazing to me because J-Trip has always been one of my idols and builds some amazing plugins. He's a lead developer behind BBPress. He was a lead developer behind BuddyPress until Boone took over. Those kinds of experiences are really, really fun to go and meet these people and realize that they're just human beings. You can go, you can have a coffee with them, have a beer afterwards, or go eat dinner with them, and they're just people, and that's really cool. You get down, it feels much more informal and less intimidating. Going and networking is definitely my favorite thing. Meeting new people, whether they're people that I specifically wanted to go to meet or someone I've never met before, is definitely my favorite experience from WordCamps. Yeah, it's definitely number one.
I can totally relate to that. It's exactly the same. Well, probably, I don't know, even more so for me. Maybe I'm like super nerdy and go to WordCamps and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's freaking John James Jacoby. That's Pippin Williamson. Oh my gosh, the guy that I've only known as just a gravatar, solving my problems, improving my plugin, selling awesome stuff online. Here they are. So WordCamps are awesome for that. What WordCamps are we going to see you at here this year?
So this year I have 2 lined up for sure, I think. Number one is not really a WordCamp, but Pressnomics will be in Phoenix in January. I will be there. And then also, as of today, I think I'm going to WordCamp San Diego at the end of March. And I haven't planned out too much further ahead. There's definitely a few more that I'll be going to. My travel will probably be a little more limited this year than last year, just because I've got a new baby on the way. So my wife might kill me if I leave too often. But yeah, I think others that I will probably go to, I'm really hoping to make it back to WordCamp Grand Rapids. I'd like to make it out to LA, maybe down to Miami or some of the other ones. I really like the Kansas City one. It's kind of my local WordCamp. It's awesome if anybody wants to come in, and that'll be probably next summer. There's a lot of really great ones. I also really like a lot of the ones that are really fun that a lot of people kind of maybe recognize more than others are some of the big ones, WordCamp Phoenix, New York, Miami, etc. But I also really like the small ones. I had a really good time at WordCamp Louisville, which was I think a year ago, and that was like there was about 50 people there, and it was awesome. So WordCamps of all sizes are great.
Totally agree. So down to the final minutes here. I'm just going to hit you with some quick questions, and you can give me quick answers if you like. So, I'd be interested to hear this from you. Who in the WordPress community inspires Pippin Williamson?
Well, one of them I already mentioned is John James Jacoby. He's master developer, awesome person. Everybody that I work with, I mean, everybody on the EDD team, definitely, for one, because they put up with me. It's awesome. All of the WordPress core contributors and developers are just like magicians. Some of the things that they can do is amazing. Like if you've ever dug into some of the advanced internals of WordPress, you look at them and you're just like, what is this? This is mind-boggling. And so realizing that somebody wrote that is cool.
How about a quick sneak peek you can give us for what's coming, what's next on Pippin Williamson's plate?
Sure. I'm working on a plugin right now, which is an add-on for Affiliate WP, which will give you the ability to pay your affiliates with a single click directly to their PayPal accounts. We released one for Stripe the other week, and so now we're doing PayPal. And so you can just go through your list of commissions and say pay now, pay now, pay now, or you can do one bulk payment and just do everything instantly. You don't ever touch the PayPal site. You don't do anything like that. You're just done. So that'll be coming here maybe in a week.
All right. How about one quick word of advice for somebody who is considering diving into the commercial plugin space?
Write a plugin you really like. If you don't like your plugin, you're not going to like it any better, even if it sells.
All right, so I'm really curious about this one. Can you help me by telling me a really, really awesome beer that I've probably never heard of, but I really, really should try?
Sure. I can give you probably quite a few. If anybody doesn't know, I really like beer. And I really like craft brewing. So one of my favorites, if you've never had a sour beer, that can be a new experience for a lot of people. So Love Child is a sour beer made by Boulevard Brewing in Kansas City. It's pretty hard to find, but if you can find it, pick it up.
Awesome. So anybody that you recommend that maybe we haven't thought of, maybe they're not on our list, but that we should ask to interview on the show?
Sure. You should get Andrew Monroe would be awesome. Another one would be Jonathan Christopher. Both of them would be great guys to have on. I can give you a whole bunch of other names too.
I have no doubt of that. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that, or didn't ask you about, that would be worth mentioning before we call it a night?
Maybe what is the one thing that you guys look for in plugins, or when you're looking for a plugin? What's the one thing that you pay attention to? I always like to hear that. When I'm going through all these different reviews on the plugins, on the repository, reviewing plugins and approving or denying them, and kind of nice to know what users are looking at too, and other developers.
I'm definitely totally love plugin development, and it's something that we do quite a lot of. And so things that really get me into a plugin, well, I definitely look at the author, because I'm to the point now where I recognize a lot of people that I think are highly reputable, and if their name is next to it, then we're good. But I also really, just like we talked about earlier, I love things that look native, that look like they're part of WordPress, that look like they belong there, and you don't even realize that it's a plugin actually that added that. Those I just love it.
Yeah, I really can't get over how important that is. Every time that I see it, it doesn't even matter if it's in the smallest plugin imaginable, a 10-line plugin or a 2-line plugin, or one that's 500,000 lines of code. If you can iterate the whole thing, the size has nothing to do with whether or not it looks native to WordPress. It's everything else that you do, and that's huge.
Cool. For me, I'd say my answer to that question is documentation and support. If it's a larger scale plugin, and I am simply trying to implement it versus build something on top of it, whatever the case may be, if the documentation isn't there, it's hard to understand how to do certain things. It's not outlined very well, not commented. Then that's huge for me. Then I'll move on to something that is.
Yeah, documentation's tough, but it's so cool when somebody gets it really right and takes the time to pay attention to it and to produce it and keep it updated. It's hard.
I'm a big fan of the video explanation. Give me a 5-minute video on how to run this thing, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I love that.
Very rarely need a lot of documentation, but a 5-minute video walkthrough, and I'm definitely that would be.
Sometimes video overviews are just awesome because they're not even really telling you how to do it. They're just giving you a set of expectations. It says, yeah, this is what this does, and sure, there may be a few caveats here and there for what you have to figure out, but overall, like, it tells you what you should expect from the plugin. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because there's a lot of plugins out there where it's really handy, but it's maybe doing something you hadn't even thought of doing, and so those videos are really great for that. For kind of like saying you hadn't even thought of doing this yet, but after you watch this video, you're going to say, oh my gosh, I want to do that.
Yep. I had a client that I worked for a long time that always had a phrase that he always said, we're going to manage expectations. Pippin, tell me how we can manage the expectations of the client. And to me, like an overview video like that is managing the expectations of your users. You're telling them this is what you should expect from this plugin.
Right on. You nailed it, my friend. Okay, so there's episode 23. Thanks, Pippin, for joining us. We're so glad you're here. Awesome.
It's my pleasure.
I think we touched on probably a third of the questions that we had, so don't be surprised if you see a message from me again inviting you back on the show in the not too distant future.
You have to do anytime.
Every week for the next 8 weeks. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being on, Pippin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks.